episodes because it's been about a week and a half since I've watched any of the show. Mike, you were able to wrap it up earlier this week, so we're going to talk about it. So full spoilers. If you've not seen it, all 10 episodes are on Disney Plus. You can go check them out. Come back and listen to this. If you want to be quote unquote spoiled, jump in. It's a cartoon show. I don't know how much spoilers are, but it was to me overall this season was a great time, and I had a good time, and I highly recommend it. That's my review for the full season. Mike, would you say the same thing before we spoil it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact that my wife and I were a united front, going crazy that we couldn't watch the finale the day it came out. We had to wait until our family left to check it out. I mean, that's saying something right there. It's great. They do a great job of capturing the nostalgia, but also upgrading it and updating it so you don't feel like you're watching something dated, because I never got around to rewatching the original before the new updated series came out, but I did chat with a couple people that did do that. They did the marathon, they checked it all out, and they're like, oh yeah, that those older cartoons don't age as well as you thought they did, at least I think, not necessarily storytelling wise, but maybe just animation and some of that.
Well, we always talk about the meme with Wolverine laying in bed looking at a photo, right? But he's in his full fucking Wolverine costume laying in the bed. Like, they were just drawing stuff back then to kind of meet the weekly deadlines of Fox Animation. But absolutely, the team, especially with the recently not departed the world, but departed the show, Bo DeMeo, even he has been actively engaging with fans, filling in stories as the shows come out. There's a lot of heart and like feeling and nostalgia went into making this series, and you can tell there's that reverence of that material.
Yeah. And sadly, I mean, I don't want to say they got lucky because it makes it sound like it's a positive coincidence, but the stories that the X-Men usually tell are sadly timeless in a way, because there's always some sort of persecuted group out there in the world that's getting genocided. That's literally a plot line in this story, and there's real world mirrors of that happening right now in the world. So you're just watching it and it's just like, wow, this is just everything is on topic. And it's just you're not expecting that in kind of like a vintage 90s cartoon, to be kind of touching on stuff that you would be able to see if you turned on the news right now in our own world.
I think in that regard as well, one of the things about the show I enjoyed is none of the characters were technically safe either. Like, characters die in this, people and characters and mutants die in this who I thought would never die, right? Not saying they can't be brought back as comic books and animated stuff. Even Morph died, quote unquote, in the first episode of the first season of the original show, but like, I was proud of them for not saying everyone has to be alive by the end of the show, if you will. So and that adds to the weight of what you're talking about, like the weight of like there are actual things in here like genocide and essentially racism against mutants, and the people who are affected by it, they don't make it out safely by the end of the show, and that is how the real world works as well.
Yeah. And it seems like really this final chapter of season 1 really revolves around our discovery of the main villain that's been kind of planning in the background, which is Bastion. Now, this was a character I wasn't super familiar with. Didn't really have any sort of nostalgia for. So it was kind of interesting. For the most part, I was being introduced to something brand new that I hadn't seen before in these X-Men cartoons. And I do. It wasn't as smooth of an introduction as I would have hoped, but I think it's just because everything else was just operating at such a high level for me. Because this is like, oh, these are all of my friends. These are all of the baddies I remember from Saturday morning cartoons. Like, it was just so easy to drop back in, and then now I'm kind of getting something delivered to me that's brand new. And even his visual design probably was a little difficult from their point of view, because it's like, we're kind of adding our own new flavor to Bastion, but also he still needs to be seated properly within this 97 universe. So I feel like sometimes that those two concepts rubbed up against each other, but overall it was still really fascinating, especially in that last episode when he kind of, I guess for lack of a better term, starts to decompose, like part of his face is coming off, and you can see
part
the
organic,
circuitry.
Part robot. Yeah, you get to see it.
Yeah. And also they just do a great job of, like, this is kind of like Villain 101, where you make us empathize with them in some way. And it's kind of nice just seeing heroes be heroes at the very, very end, where they kind of had every reason to just obliterate this dude when he was underneath the Sentinel foot. Like, no one would have blinked an eye if they just vaporized him from existence, but they're like, no, we're going to attempt to try to save them because we're good people. I kind of had that similar feeling when I was watching those first 30 minutes of Shang-Chi, where I feel like in a lot of superhero movies, before they were to do this big bus fighting scene, they would have fabricated a way for the bus to briefly stop, and then all of the people get off the bus, and then we'll go back on our fighting adventure. But no, through that whole bus fight, Shang-Chi is doing his best to keep people out of the way, save them, stop them from falling out of the door. So it's just a nice reminder that, like, when we're watching these superhero movies, there's supposed to be a hero element involved. So it is kind of nice that Cyclops does kind of revert back to his kind of Boy Scoutness, which is weirdly endearing.
And it worked because I think he kind of had that arc for the season, right? Like, honestly, the idea of him, like, is he married to Jean Grey or Madeline Pryor? His son was sent to the future. He finds out his son is Cable. Professor X, it literally just came back to life according to them. Like, Magneto's trying to destroy the world. Like, there's a lot going on in those last few episodes, which is great because that's what they've set up, all these seeds. None of it was surprising, but it was still great to see it all kind of culminate, right? Like, it felt like a lot of those strings, those loose strings, were not all of them were tied up, but like it felt like, we know what the ending is and we know where the next season's kind of going to go. I will say one of the things I see online, a lot of people, it's mixed, but I agree with the people who say Wolverine was sidelined. Yes, because he's not the X-Men. Wolverine is a character of the X-Men. The X-Men are technically dozens of other characters, right? And
also just a crazy visual moment. I mean, that is like the epitome of like a comic book splash page, right? Yeah. Just the adamantium being ripped off of his bones. Like, so brutal. And it just goes to, it also is a great storytelling mechanic to show you how serious Magneto is in that moment, that he would resort to doing something that brutal. That's how high stakes it was. And then also, of course, the gears in my brain start to run of like, well, of course Wolverine's not dead. Like, they would never think to do that to a character of that magnitude in this show. But then also, as we see in our little post-credit scene, even when a character's dead, there's probably a way they're going to bring him back to life. It is a comic book after all. Well, but like, I'm already imagining kind of Wolverine's like arc in season 2, where he's going to have the bone claws, and he's not going to have that adamantium to make him as lethal. And then I could see him maybe finding a way to get the adamantium back on him or something. I don't know. There's some sort of journey that he's going to go through.
I have an idea of what that journey is already, because at the end, you bring up the post-credit scene, that's where it's going to go, because we see technically Apocalypse in the past when he's in Saban with one group of people. We see the future where Cyclops meets his young son Cable, right, where he is in the future. Then we see Apocalypse at the side of Genosha picking up the card, where Gambit was technically the Horseman of Death for Apocalypse in the comic books. Well,
yeah, and I can't believe I never, like, I knew that that is a very kind of basic part of Apocalypse's like origin. He has those horsemen, and I was just like, oh yeah, I never thought that like that would just be a very easy way to bring somebody back.
We are missing 3 X-Men who don't show up again at the end, Mike. If you add Gambit, add Wolverine, Storm, and Morph. Where are Wolverine, Storm, and Morph at the end of this? Right, we don't see them. They're not in the past. They're not in the future. They're missing on Forge's board. So what if the 4 horsemen for Apocalypse are literally the 4 people we Gambit, Wolverine, Storm, and Morph become the new horsemen for Apocalypse in the present day?
Oh, that would be pretty wild.
Because Wolverine
I did also look up Apocalypse's power rankings when I was on that page a few minutes ago. Man, he's all like 6 and 7s in almost every category. He's not somebody you want to mess with.
Yeah. So it sets up some great. That is a sign of a good show right here. We're talking about the show, but we're talking about how excited we are for the next season, right? Like, Bo DeMeo says he's already written some of season 2. That means they're probably going to fast track this because of the popularity of the show, Mike, right? Like get the voice actors back, do all this stuff. I had such a good time watching this show. My wife was on board as well. I couldn't watch. We were behind, I think, a week or maybe 2 because of stuff she had going on here, ending the school year. And I was like, can I watch it? She's like, no, not till I get to watch it with you. So absolutely love that. It was just fun to kind of see all this stuff. And I will say the one thing that disappoints me the most, that I've seen the most talk about this show, Mike, and you are guilty of this. I'm pointing at you right now.
Yes.
The show is X-Men 97, and you don't have a single X-Men on our thumbnail back here. You have because all the cameos that appeared in the last episode.
I'm going for clicks, man.
Yeah.
Okay, if these cameos were more integral to the plot of the end of the show, I wouldn't have just so unabashedly included them on our thumbnail.
Oh, I know.
But they are the embodiment of just Easter egg fun things to point at the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood Leonardo DiCaprio meme pointing from your couch.
They threw so many at us there in that last episode in the art style of the 90s too, which was even better, I think.
Yeah, and it's not like it wasn't things that we hadn't seen earlier in the season. Obviously, we saw Captain America, and we saw also Spider-Man, maybe in episode 7 or 8, very briefly.
It was before we saw the Peter Parker version on the street.
Yeah, it was when Magneto was doing his big old EMP, I believe. So the fact that... So all of that stuff that we saw technically could have been anything, right? Yeah. It's just we're seeing comic book characters drawn in a animated art style. This could be living in any universe, right? Mm-hmm. But the fact that I got to see Peter Parker and Mary Jane unmistakably from the animated Spider-Man TV show just goes to tell me, since that was saved until the last episode, they better... be heavily thinking about reviving that show. That was my childhood. That was everything to me. If they could bring back... And we were trying to determine what it would be called, like Spider-Man 98. Is that what we figured?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want Spider-Man 98 so bad, Chris. And because the only thing about that show that doesn't age super well, to me, in my brain...
Is it the Clone Saga? The Clone Saga? Because that
no, it's good. That Peter is constantly talking to himself because he needs to kind of narrate what's happening because he has like no other team members. So he's either quipping to himself as like a narrator or he's talking to
he's
nothing
explaining
at all.
the scene. Yeah, he's just talking out
loud.
Exactly.
It's a thing that I hate a lot in anime where characters are constantly narrating their thoughts and feelings so they don't have to animate them. So if they could give it this like 10 episode, a high production value appeal, I mean, oh my God, some of the amazing animation scenes that we saw this season attributed to like a Spider-Man character. Ooh, man. And there's so many things you could pull on now. Like when that Spider-Man show was being animated, they went pretty weird with it sometimes. I mean, he became that living spider. Yep. They did clone sagas, but they weren't really reaching out into a lot of until the very end. Some of this crazy multiversal stuff. Now, like all of this stuff is available to them.
Well, it wasn't even it was very siloed to Spider-Man characters, right? Occasionally you get like a Punisher, but like, you know, in this we saw Captain America, we saw 90s Iron Man, we saw Daredevil, right? We got to see Alpha Flight. It was King T'Chaka, by the way, which was an interesting thing. It wasn't T'Challa because it's the 90s still, so it was T'Chaka. Interesting enough, Silver Samurai. You know, bring in the Kingpin again, bringing back all the Spider-Man characters. I don't care how you do it, right? Rewrite it if you have to, because I think a lot of those Spider-Man villains have cool power sets, but like. Oh, you want to have Luke Cage and Iron Fist in an episode? Bring them in because they're all in New York at this point in the comic books.
Yeah, give me like a two-parter where he teams up with Daredevil. Yeah. That would be so rad. I mean, two characters that are often paired together.
Even bring Jessica Jones in her like jewel outfit, right? Like the purple stuff, because it's a cartoon. You can have fun with it. Do some wild stuff.
Like, and this is the best part and greatest advantage of this show, where they can straddle these two ideas of producing a superhero story. You're in a more mature animated universe, so you can tell these more affecting stories and really lean into the life and death of it all. Like, there are stakes involved. But also, you're rendering everything in flat 2D animation, so if you introduce like a Mysterio character right on screen, I'm not going to be questioning it like, oh, well, how does Mysterio have all of these, powers of projection and, putting people in this like psychedelic mist. Whereas if you do it in the MCU, you absolutely have to explain it because that's the world that they've created.
Well, exactly. You go back and look at the X-Men episode Motendo. You'd never doing that in live action. You're not doing Motendo in live action. That's silly. But, in cartoons, in Spider-Man and X-Men, it works out really, really well. I will say one of the cool character evolutions in this is Jubilee, doing the cool stuff with her powers, right? The fireworks, the spinning wheels. She had a really good arc in this. Did I send you the photo? I think, I don't know if I sent it to you or not. The opening scene credit in the first episode, like it shows like the humans running towards the screen away from the Sentinels. Those are the Sentinels they turned into... the Super Sentinels or whatever, the Sentinel Primes at the end of the show. I don't think I sent that to you. Maybe I did send it to you. I don't
think you did.
Okay, well I'm gonna have to find this because it was a really, really cool little like comparison. Like, oh, these Sentinels actually they've been seeding the artwork. They're seeding the show with this stuff for a while. So I really love all the deep cuts, all the Easter eggs in the show that they've done because. You can just tell when love and care goes into it, right? Like, it's not like it's hey, we just did a quick cheap cash grab to do on nostalgia. Everything about the show is just firing on all cylinders, and I'm glad they're at least doing a season 2, maybe more, maybe season 3, along the way. Is there anything you want to see in the show next that you can think of? I know the Onslaught character. Are you familiar with the Onslaught saga? So I feel that's coming down the road next because he was created after the cartoon went off the air. Maybe even the more recent Krakoa Island of Mutant Nation, which is the past 4 or 5 years of comic books. They could do that. Is there anything you're grabbing at here? Or you just want quality. You just want quality content. You don't care what it is.
I think so. On that Alive or Dead board from Forge, I think was Scarlet Witch one of the dead characters on there.
Off-world.
Off-world.
Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch were off-world.
I would love to see Scarlet Witch come in and interact with Magneto in some way because that's just not something that we're really going to see organically in the MCU at any point in time. They have just not set up that family lineage in any way. It wouldn't really make any sense for it to happen necessarily. So the kind of closest we're going to get in kind of a high-level storytelling way is going to be in X-Men 97. So I would love to see have they alluded to like House of M happening at all in the X-Men?
No, because that came much later after the cartoon was off. So you could get maybe at the end of season 2, everyone who's off world comes back for some reason, and then you get a House of M season 3, even kick it off like that.
Yeah, that could be crazy. So there's a lot of things that this engine that they've created can now do, and I would love that. But I wouldn't be too shocked if there is maybe, since this is officially under the Marvel umbrella, Kevin Feige executive produced, I could see some things maybe being off the table, right? If for some reason they are imagining like a House of M storyline in the MCU at some point in time, just as an example, I could see them going like, maybe lean away from that. We kind of want to do that.
I could see them doing it because like all this is based on so much comic books, and they could do so much that they can't do in live action, right? If they did House of M in Marvel, it's going to be, we don't have Scarlet Witch anymore. Like all the Quicksilver said, they're going to have to recreate these characters. Hawkeye is a huge part of that. He's on his way out. So I think short of MCU rebooting from the get-go, I think they can just have all that they want in here and even include some of those non-X-Men characters. But that's a good thing. You have 27 years of comic books now to lean back on. Bastion wasn't created until X-Men, the original cartoon was over. So it's funny to have him in here as a villain because he was created after the show was over. So I don't know. I just had a good time with it. I want more, but I'm glad we got this kind of when we did.
I need 10 episodes every single year. Do not make me wait 18 months, 15 months. I need X-Men. I need this show running for at least 5 more seasons.
And this can live alongside the MCU content. I don't consider this MCU proper. So if you have two
Oh,
live action
yeah,
shows,
no.
this you can have this beside it, and it'll be fine. With
Yeah,
me.
I don't need this to cross over with What If. I don't need some sort of multiversal tear to throw one of these characters into the secret war battle that everything's building up to. Just this can be its own thing. It's a continuation of something else that we know and love. If you're going to cross over with Spider-Man 98,
Yeah.
cross over with more Fantastic Four
the
animated
90s
stuff.
animated
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
Yeah, so.
Just let me live in that world. I love it. It's so warm and cozy.
Bring it all back. It's nostalgic. Just we always talk about the nostalgia factor. Like I would love to watch this show on my tube TV, Mike, to see what it looks like and how that feels. That takes me back. So maybe one day. Well, that's the show for this week. We had a lot going on here. Very, very excited. Glad to have you back, Mike, and we'll be back again next week. But people don't know what